I don't know how much longer I can keep fighting this. It just hurts so much.
The hospital monitor beeped faster as Daniel's trembling hand gripped the edge of the bed. "Call them. Please, call my daughters," he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of regret. His breathing was shallow, his once confident face now pale and broken. The nurse looked at him with confusion. "Your daughters?" she asked gently. Tears slid down his temples as he nodded weakly. "I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life." Years earlier, Daniel had everything a man could dream of: wealth, respect, a beautiful home, and a wife who loved him deeply. Sarah had always believed in him, even when his business was just an idea. She stood beside him through sleepless nights, financial struggles, and moments when failure seemed inevitable. Together, they built a life full of hope. The day Sarah told him she was pregnant, Daniel lifted her in his arms and laughed with excitement. "Finally," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "My son is coming." Sarah smiled softly, placing her hand on his cheek. "Boy or girl, this child will be our blessing." Daniel kissed her forehead. "Of course, but imagine teaching my son everything I know. He will carry my name." Months later, their first child was born. The sound of a baby crying filled the room, but when the doctor said, "It's a girl," Daniel's smile froze for a moment. He quickly forced a laugh, telling himself it didn't matter. He held the tiny baby carefully. She wrapped her small fingers around his thumb. Sarah looked at him with love. "She's perfect," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Yes, perfect." But later that evening, when his parents visited, the atmosphere changed. His mother forced a polite smile. "A girl is good, but next time you will give us a boy." Sarah felt the words like silent arrows. Weeks turned into months, and Daniel became increasingly focused on trying again. He loved his daughter, but something inside him remained unsatisfied. When Sarah became pregnant again, Daniel was certain this time would be different. He bought small blue clothes, toy cars, and even spoke about teaching his future son how to run the family business. "I can feel it," he said confidently. "This time it's a boy." Sarah hesitated. "What if it's another girl?" Daniel laughed nervously. "Impossible." The day of delivery came. Daniel paced outside the hospital room, his heart pounding with anticipation. Moments later, the doctor stepped out. "Congratulations. It's a healthy baby girl." Silence. Daniel stared at the doctor, as if the words had struck him physically. "A girl?" he repeated slowly. When he entered the room, Sarah was holding their newborn with tired but joyful eyes. "She's beautiful, Daniel." He nodded, but his expression had changed. The excitement was gone. That night, his father spoke bluntly. "A man without a son has no legacy." Daniel said nothing, but the words echoed in his mind. As months passed, he grew distant. He spent more time at work and less time at home. The laughter that once filled their house slowly disappeared. Sarah tried to reconnect with him. "You've changed," she said quietly one evening. "I'm just tired," Daniel replied coldly. "But you barely look at your daughters anymore," she whispered. Daniel looked away. "I am under pressure, Sarah. You wouldn't understand." Her eyes filled with tears. "They are your children too." 1 year later, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. Fear mixed with hope inside her heart. She wanted peace in her family, but she also feared Daniel's reaction. When she told him the news, he simply nodded. "This must be a boy," he said firmly. Throughout the pregnancy, Daniel became obsessed. He prayed constantly, visited spiritual leaders, and even blamed Sarah for what he called bad luck. Sarah endured the emotional weight in silence. The day finally came. After hours of labor, the doctor delivered the baby and smiled gently. "It's a healthy baby girl." The room fell into a heavy silence. Daniel stood frozen. His jaw tightened, and anger filled his eyes. Sarah looked exhausted but hopeful. "Daniel, she's our child." But Daniel stepped back. "I cannot continue like this," he said, his voice shaking with frustration. Sarah felt her heart sink. "What are you saying?" "I need a son," he replied coldly. Tears rolled down her face. "These are your children." Daniel shook his head. "You don't understand the pressure I face. So you will punish us for something beyond my control?" she cried. Days later, the argument escalated into a painful confrontation. "I cannot build my future with someone who cannot give me a son," Daniel declared. Sarah felt her world collapse. "After everything we built together?" Daniel avoided her gaze. "You are abandoning your family?" she whispered. "I am doing what is necessary," he replied. Necessary. That word echoed painfully in Sarah's mind as she watched the man she loved walk away. Daniel soon remarried, convinced that his future wife would give him the son he desired. Meanwhile, Sarah faced a harsh reality. 3 daughters, no financial support, no partner, but she refused to break. Late at night, after her daughters fell asleep, she allowed herself to cry quietly. Her eldest daughter once walked in and asked softly, "Mommy, why are you sad?" Sarah wiped her tears quickly and forced a smile. "I am not sad," she said gently. "I am strong, because I have you." The little girl hugged her tightly. "I will take care of you when I grow up," she promised innocently. Sarah kissed her forehead. "You don't need to take care of me," she whispered. "Just become the best version of yourself." Life became a daily battle. Sarah worked tirelessly, taking multiple jobs just to provide basic needs. Some days there was barely enough food. Some nights, she stayed awake wondering how she would pay school fees. But she never allowed her daughters to feel unwanted. "You are not a disappointment," she often told them. "You are my greatest blessing." Her daughters grew up hearing those words repeatedly, and slowly those words became their strength. They studied harder than other children. They supported one another. They promised themselves that one day, they would change their mother's life. Years passed. The pain of abandonment never fully disappeared, but it transformed into determination. One evening, Sarah gathered her daughters and spoke with unusual seriousness. "You may not have a father in this house," she said calmly, "but you will never lack love." Her middle daughter asked carefully, "Does he not love us?" Sarah paused before answering. "Sometimes, people realize the value of love too late." Meanwhile, Daniel believed he had made the right decision. His second marriage started with excitement and confidence. He was certain this new chapter would finally give him the son he desired. But life had other plans. At first, Daniel believed everything was finally falling into place. His new wife, Vanessa, was charming, confident, and came from a respected family. Their wedding was lavish, filled with influential guests and expensive promises about the future. Daniel felt proud, convinced that this new beginning would correct what he believed had gone wrong in his past. This time, he told his closest friend during the celebration, "Everything will be different. I will finally have the son I deserve." Months later, Vanessa announced her pregnancy. Daniel's excitement returned stronger than ever. He became attentive, protective, and even overly generous, buying expensive gifts and preparing a luxurious nursery decorated entirely in blue. He had already chosen a name for the boy. "This is my legacy," he often repeated confidently. But when the day arrived, the doctor's words once again shattered his expectations. "It's a girl." Daniel forced a smile in front of others, but inside, frustration began to grow again. Vanessa noticed the change quickly. "You said you loved me," she confronted him one evening. "I do," Daniel replied defensively. "Then why do you look disappointed every time you look at our daughter?" Daniel remained silent. 2 years later, Vanessa became pregnant again. This time, Daniel became even more obsessed. He invested money in spiritual consultations, expensive medical clinics, and even strange rituals suggested by distant relatives. He was desperate. He refused to accept another outcome. But once again, life did not obey his expectations. Another girl. The tension in the marriage became unbearable. Arguments became frequent, louder, and more painful. "You are never satisfied," Vanessa shouted one night. "I have sacrificed everything for this family." Daniel replied angrily. "And what about the daughters you abandoned?" she fired back. Daniel's silence revealed the truth he never wanted to confront. Years passed, and the son he desperately wanted never came. His second marriage eventually collapsed under the weight of disappointment and resentment. Vanessa left, taking her daughters with her. Daniel suddenly found himself alone in a large, silent house that once symbolized success. But the loneliness was only the beginning. His business began to struggle due to poor decisions and risky investments. His focus had been consumed by his obsession with legacy, and he neglected the responsibilities that once made him successful. Contracts were lost. Partners withdrew their support. Financial pressure increased. The same people who once praised him slowly distanced themselves. Phone calls became fewer. Invitations stopped coming. One evening, Daniel sat alone in his office, staring at unpaid bills scattered across the desk. His hands trembled slightly as he whispered, "How did everything fall apart so quickly?" But deep inside, he already knew the answer. Years of pride had blinded him. He had spent so much time chasing the child he wanted that he lost the children who loved him. Meanwhile, Sarah's daughters were rewriting a completely different story. Emma, the eldest, had developed a passion for helping others after watching her mother struggle through illness without proper medical care. She studied tirelessly, often staying awake late into the night reading borrowed textbooks. One day, she returned home with tears of joy in her eyes. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "I got the scholarship." Sarah covered her mouth in disbelief. "A scholarship?" Emma nodded. "I'm going to medical school." Sarah embraced her tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. "I always knew you were destined for something great," she whispered proudly. Lena, the second daughter, had witnessed the unfair treatment her mother endured during the divorce. She became passionate about justice. "I want to protect people who are treated unfairly," she once said firmly. Years later, she was accepted into law school. Sophia, the youngest, possessed a natural business instinct. As a teenager, she started small projects selling handmade items online. She saved every small profit carefully. "I want to make sure we never struggle like before," she told her mother one evening. Through discipline and determination, Sophia eventually built a successful company. Despite their achievements, the daughters never forgot the pain of their past. One quiet evening, while they were having dinner together, Lena asked the question they had all silently carried for years. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked carefully. Sarah paused before answering. "I used to think about him often," she admitted honestly. "But not anymore." "Do you hate him?" Sophia asked. Sarah shook her head slowly. "Hate is a heavy burden," she replied softly. "I chose to let it go." Emma looked thoughtful. "If we ever meet him again," she said calmly, "I don't know how I will feel." Sarah reached for her hand gently. "You don't need to decide now," she said reassuringly. "Life has its own way of bringing answers." Years later, those words would prove true. Back in his empty house, Daniel's health began to decline. Stress, loneliness, and regret slowly consumed him. One morning, he collapsed while trying to stand. The once powerful businessman now struggled to complete simple tasks. Doctors warned him that his condition required long-term treatment. Medical expenses increased rapidly. Without stable income, the situation became critical. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt completely powerless. As he sat alone in the hospital room, memories began to return. He remembered the tiny fingers of his first daughter holding his thumb. He remembered Sarah's supportive smile during difficult times. He remembered the warmth of a home filled with laughter. Tears filled his eyes as reality struck him with painful clarity. He had abandoned love in search of pride. One afternoon, while scrolling through news on his phone, something caught his attention. A headline appeared: "Renowned Dr. Emma Sarah receives international recognition for medical breakthrough." His heart skipped a beat. Emma. The name felt familiar. He clicked the article with trembling hands. The photograph confirmed what he feared and hoped. It was his daughter, his little girl, now a respected doctor. His breathing became heavier as he continued searching. Another article appeared. Top lawyer Lena Sarah wins landmark case protecting women's rights. Then another. Entrepreneur Sophia Sarah expands company internationally. Daniel lowered the phone slowly, overwhelmed by emotion. They succeeded, he whispered, despite everything he had done. They succeeded. Without him. Tears rolled down his face freely. He realized something that broke his heart completely. They had built a life without needing him. Days passed before he gathered the courage to act. He asked the nurse hesitantly, "Can you help me find someone?" "Of course," she replied kindly. "My daughters," he said quietly. "I need to speak to them. If they are willing to listen." Fear filled his heart. He knew he did not deserve their forgiveness. But regret gave him no peace. He needed to try, because for the first time in his life, Daniel understood what true loss meant. Daniel stared at the phone number written on the small piece of paper the nurse had given him. His fingers trembled so much that he could barely hold it. For hours, he rehearsed what he would say, but every sentence felt too small compared to the damage he had caused. "What words can fix years of silence?" he whispered to himself. Finally, with a deep breath, he dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" A calm female voice answered. His heart pounded loudly in his chest. He recognized the strength in that voice. "Emma?" he asked weakly. "Yes, this is Emma speaking." Daniel closed his eyes, overwhelmed by emotion. "It's me." Silence. Heavy silence. Emma's voice became cautious. "Who?" "It's your father." The words felt strange even to him. Emma did not respond immediately. He could almost hear her processing the shock. "My father?" she repeated slowly. "Yes," Daniel whispered, shame flooding every part of him. "I know I don't deserve to call myself that, but I had to try." Emma exhaled slowly. "We have not heard from you in many years," she said carefully. "I know," he admitted. "And every day, I regret it." Emma remained silent for a moment before asking, "Why now?" The question pierced deeply. "Because I finally understand what I lost," he replied honestly. Emma hesitated. "I need time to think." "Please," Daniel said quickly, fear entering his voice. "I am not asking for anything. I only want a chance to apologize." Emma ended the call politely but without promise. Later that evening, the 3 sisters sat together in Emma's living room. "He called?" Lena asked in disbelief. Emma nodded slowly. Sophia crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "After all these years? He says he regrets everything," Emma added quietly. Lena's voice carried a mixture of anger and pain. "Regret does not erase what he did." Sophia looked at her sisters. "Do we even owe him a conversation?" Emma remained thoughtful. "I don't know. But I feel like avoiding him will not erase the past either." Lena sighed deeply. "I spent years imagining what I would say if I ever saw him again. And now that moment is here, I feel confused." Sophia looked toward their mother, who had been quietly listening. Sarah spoke gently. "You are not little girls anymore. You can decide what is right for your hearts." "Would you see him?" Emma asked. Sarah paused before answering. "I forgave him a long time ago," she said calmly. "But forgiveness does not mean forgetting the lesson." Sophia leaned forward slightly. "What lesson?" "That love should never be conditional," Sarah replied softly. Days later, Emma agreed to meet Daniel at the hospital. As she entered the room, she saw a man who looked nothing like the powerful father she remembered from childhood. He looked fragile, smaller, broken. Daniel's eyes filled with tears the moment he saw her. "Emma," he whispered. She stood quietly, observing him. "You look different," she said honestly. "I am different," Daniel replied painfully. Emma took a seat beside the bed. For a moment, neither spoke. "I heard about your achievements," Daniel said finally. "You became everything I should have been proud of." Emma remained calm. "Our mother taught us strength." Daniel lowered his gaze. She was always stronger than me. Silence filled the room again. I don't expect forgiveness, Daniel continued. I only want you to know. I was wrong. Emma studied his face carefully, searching for sincerity. I spent years believing that having a son would make me important, he admitted. But now I understand. I already had everything. Emma's eyes softened slightly, but her voice remained steady. Do you understand how much pain you caused? Daniel nodded slowly as tears escaped his eyes. I remember the day you left, Emma continued. Mom tried to stay strong, but I could hear her crying at night. Each word felt like a quiet storm. I cannot change the past, Daniel said weakly. No, Emma replied calmly. You cannot. Days later, Lena and Sophia also agreed to visit. The reunion was filled with emotion, tension, and unspoken memories. Lena crossed her arms as she stood near the door. You wanted a son, she said bluntly. Daniel nodded, unable to defend himself. And now? Sophia asked. Now I only want peace, he replied softly. Sophia studied him carefully. Peace comes after accountability. Daniel accepted the truth in her words. I failed all of you, he admitted. Lena's voice trembled slightly despite her attempt to appear strong. Do you know how many times we wondered what was wrong with us? Daniel's face collapsed under the weight of guilt. There was never anything wrong with you, he whispered painfully. The problem was my ignorance. Emma spoke gently but firmly. Mom struggled to pay school fees. She worked until exhaustion. She sacrificed everything. Daniel closed his eyes as tears rolled down his cheeks. I remember her hands shaking from fatigue, Sophia added quietly. I was blind, Daniel said brokenly. The room filled with heavy emotion. Finally, Emma spoke. We did not come here to punish you, she said calmly. We came to understand if you truly changed. Daniel looked at them with desperation and sincerity. I would give anything to go back and choose differently, he confessed. Lena exhaled slowly. The past cannot change, she said. But the future can still teach something. Sophia looked at her sisters before speaking. We are not helping you because you deserve it, she clarified calmly. We are helping you because we choose compassion. Daniel broke down completely. I don't deserve daughters like you, he cried. Emma placed a gentle hand on his arm. Love is not about deserving, she said quietly. It is about choosing what is right. With their support, Daniel began receiving proper treatment. But more importantly, he began learning humility. He listened more. He spoke less. He appreciated small moments. One afternoon, as they sat together peacefully, Daniel spoke softly. I spent years chasing a legacy, he said. But legacy was sitting in front of me the whole time. Emma smiled slightly. A legacy is not a name, she replied. It is the impact we leave in people's lives. Daniel nodded slowly. For the first time in many years, he felt grateful. Grateful for a second chance. Grateful for daughters he once failed to value. As time passed, their relationship slowly healed. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer controlled the future. Daniel dedicated his remaining years to supporting causes that empowered young girls and promoted equal opportunities. He often shared his story openly, hoping others would not repeat his mistake. One evening, as the family gathered together peacefully, Daniel looked at his daughters with pride he once denied himself. You did not just save my life, he said emotionally. You saved my soul. Emma smiled gently. Sometimes, she said, life teaches the hardest lessons in the most painful ways. And in that moment, Daniel finally understood. The greatest blessing he ever received was never the son he wanted. It was the daughters he almost lost. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe people truly change? And remember, never underestimate the value of love, because the people you overlook today may be the ones who save you tomorrow.